Hi guys, and welcome back to the early bird photo news, this time from a cool little town called 1770. Before we get started, I just wanted to warn you that there's a lot of scammers down there in the comments that pretend to be me and offer you some sort of free camera if you join them on Telegram or WhatsApp. That's definitely not me. And if you're not sure whether you're communicating with me or someone else, click on that person's name that has my profile picture, and if there's no videos, then it's not me and it's a scam and they're just trying to get your money or your address or your email address. So don't fall for it, don't fall for the scammers. If I do giveaways like we currently do on the bird photography show, I will always announce the winners in the video and will not just randomly contact you in the comments. We're currently on our way back down the East Coast, back to the Gold Coast, where we still have a lot of our things, so we're gonna pack them up and then see where life will take us next. Well, there's no cassowaries or rifle birds here anymore, unfortunately. I still have been able to capture some fantastic birds like white-browed robins, and we're still up in the Mariba area, some little kingfishers in the Townsville area, and some awesome flycatchers over the last few days like the leaden flycatcher and the shining flycatcher, as well as some more beautiful red-tailed black cockatoos. The total image count will likely be right around 100,000 images I've taken in the last few weeks, and if you're shooting at 20 or 30 frames per second, the things add up very quickly and you end up with a lot of files. However, you also don't miss critical moments, so I don't mind shooting at 20 or 30 frames per second, getting more files, having to delete more, but in return also capture the best images. I don't like to edit my images on the road. That's something that I want to do at home on my big computer with my proper screen. But at least for now, I've been able to already show you some of the videos that I've taken because they are easier to edit for me on the road. The only image I've been able to edit so far is that cassowary with the black background in the pouring rain, where those raindrops just look like little stars in the night sky. And if you guys want to learn all about image editing and making your own images stand out, I would highly recommend that you check out my masterclass where I teach you step by step all the necessary things you need to know in Photoshop to make your own images stand out. And while you edit, you may as well save some time with my pro sets where you can with just one click transform your raw files to a great starting point for the editing process. And I've also recently released an R7 guide that's also linked down there for you in the description that will help you to set up your R7 for success. Last week, Canon has released firmware updates for the R6, the R5 and the R3. Let's skip over the R6 because there didn't seem to be any dramatic changes, but the R5 and the R3 got some very cool updates. The R5 in particular, I think, has gotten an update that was long needed and is a real game changer for the camera because Canon added a section in the menu that allows you to change the operating temperature from standard to high, which means that the camera won't overheat so quickly anymore. It still gets hot, but it doesn't shut off on you. And this is something that I had trouble with in the field, especially when I was up Cape York recently, where it's quite hot and humid and the cameras would constantly shut down on me and I wasn't able to film. So having the ability to now most likely film much longer, even in these high temperatures, is something that I really welcome and I think makes the R5 significantly better and possibly the best camera for me out there right now. One thing that happens now that you need to be aware of if you set the temperature setting to high, that the camera and the CF Express cards will get extremely hot when you take them out of the camera. So you have to be careful with that, and it may affect the lifespan of the camera or the card. I don't know, but that's something that could possibly happen as well. But personally, I'm just happy that I will be able to film whenever I need to film now. I haven't fully tested it in the field because it's just not hot enough here right now, but from what I've seen in other videos, people have been filming for hours and hours in modes that previously just shut off the camera. So I'm really looking forward to using this update in the field because it makes the R5 cameras a lot more usable for me, and I've two of them, so I'm very happy with this update. The only thing left now for Canon to remove on the R5 is that silly 29-minute 59 seconds recording limit that just has no place in this world anymore. The R3 doesn't have it, the R7 have it, so let's get rid of it. The camera that got the biggest firmware update is actually the R3. While the R5 mainly got video updates, the R3 also got some significant photo updates. First of all, it can now shoot 240 frames per second in full HD mode in video, so super slow motion, which is awesome. And then it now can also shoot up to 195 frames per second in full RAW in photo mode. Now that's something that's kind of unheard of. Nikon has started this trend with their 120 frames per second in JPEG mode, where you can shoot for a long time, so that's pretty cool, but it's JPEG. Whereas Canon, you have full RAW files up to 195 frames per second. If you're shooting some really fast action, you have it like a bird coming out of a nesting hollow and you want to capture those first few moments it comes out of the nest, I think this feature can be very good. Of course, there's also some limitations like with most things in life, and that is this feature doesn't last very long. It's basically over before it started. Because if you're shooting at 190 frames per second, your buffer is just 50 images. So you can actually shoot for 0.26 seconds. You can adjust the frame rate and then you can shoot a little bit longer. For instance, you can pick 50 frames or 100 frames per second and then shoot between like 1 second and 0.3 something of a second. But all in all, this feature is quite limited to a very short period of time. So you have to use it carefully. Also because it clogs up your full buffer for 6 to 10 seconds. So if you use that burst mode, it goes click, takes 50 images, and then it takes a long time to clear the buffer, and you can actually not take any images during that time. So it's not good for consecutive action, but it's quite a cool feature if you have just some very dramatic short moment like a bullet coming out of a gun or bird taking off, something like that. I think there can be useful, but overall it's quite limited. However, I'm very happy to see this kind of technology coming into the cameras, like pre-captures where you record before you take the images actually, or after you take the images, and also these super high frame rates that can be very helpful in super high action environments. If you upgrade your R3, it's actually not readily available in the menu just yet. You have to go to your custom functions and then activate it in there. It's the H with the little C sign. And once you activate it there, you can also press the info button and then select your frame rate and the buffer size. So for me, when I'm trying it out, I'll probably set it to like 150 or to 195 frames per second and try to find some fast action. I haven't found anything yet where it's worthwhile trying, but I think it will be a feature that we'll use from time to time in the future. And I'm just glad to see Canon innovating some cool stuff like that. Another small downside with this feature is that you don't have continuous autofocus tracking or active exposure metering while you take the images for those 0.26 seconds. I don't think that's really an issue. The autofocus will focus until the very moment you press the shutter button, and I personally shoot in manual mode all the time, so the camera doesn't really have to do any extra metering, so that's not a problem, but that's just another limitation for now. Canon also added the ability to have the electronic shutter sound with the mechanical shutter, but that seems to be a very strange feature because you can't quiet down the mechanical shutter. So if you set the shutter sound to very low volume, you can still hear the mechanical shutter, and you only hear the electronic shutter sound, the fake shutter sound, over the mechanical shutter sound if you set it to one of the high volume settings. So I don't really know, first of all, why anyone would want to use the mechanical shutter on the R3, and secondly, I also don't know why you would really need the electronic shutter sound with the mechanical shutter. So an interesting new addition, but unless you could make the mechanical shutter quiet, I don't think it's that super useful. Remember how I said in my last video you might have to be careful when installing new firmware? And now Canon is forcing me to do this impromptu little video because they've been pulling firmware 1.2 for the R3 for an undisclosed reason. I assume there is some sort of issue that the new firmware is causing with the camera. I haven't encountered it myself, but I also haven't used it too much. So if you haven't installed the new firmware yet, I would probably hold off. I haven't heard anything about the R5 firmware, and I've used it a lot already without any obvious issues, so that seems to be safe for now, but maybe you want to hold off for a little while until Canon has resolved all these issues. Canon definitely seems to committed to keep producing those f8 and f11 STM lenses they've been making for a while. We have the 800 f11, for instance, 100 to 400 RF, that's wide open at f8. And now there's also rumors that Canon will be making a 100 to 600 f8 to f11 lens. That would be a super small, super zoom basically, that will allow you to get a great zoom range at a pretty small price point and pretty small weight. Of course, there's always the limitations with the aperture like that you have to use very high ISO and the image quality and autofocus may not be as good, but I think for many people this will definitely be an interesting lens. What do you think about a lens like this? Would that be interesting for you? Maybe a cheap alternative to the 100 to 500mm lens? Make sure to let me know in the comments. As always, we have no Sony news this week, but hopefully in the next few weeks we'll hear some more rumors about that A7R5, for instance. We do have a few Nikon news though. First of all, the firmware 2.1 has come out a while ago now, and while I haven't been able to test the camera myself yet because I've been traveling on the road and it's back at the Gold Coast with my friend, I have only heard good things about the firmware update, and the autofocus seems to work significantly better now. For instance, the initial subject recognition seems to be much better, and the camera seems to be more able to stick onto the bird and not hunt onto the background so much, for instance. And this was also the main complaint when I was using the camera. The initial subject recognition just wasn't as good as like a Sony or a Canon, but that seems to have been dramatically improved now. So I'm looking forward to using the camera, and it's great to hear that Nikon was able to improve the autofocus dramatically. Have you been using the Z9 with firmware 2.1? Make sure to share your experiences with me in the comments. Nikon also seems to be able to now ship out the Z9 cameras much faster, with Adorama shipping cameras ordered at the end of May and B&H shipping cameras ordered in April. Of course, the longer the Z9 is available, the lower the orders will be as well, because most people will have ordered their Z9 by now, but it's great to hear and see that Nikon is able to at least deliver more and more Z9 cameras to everyone who wants one. I will now go ahead, edit this video, and I will also have to decide where to go in the morning to photograph some more nice birds. So if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up for it. Make sure to let me know all your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to my channel down there, and I will see you in the next video very soon. Bye guys.